So let's take a little trip back to 1986. Big hair, synthesizers everywhere, and Hollywood was discovering something magical. Audiences would absolutely fall in love with a robot. And not a terrifying robot, like something out of The Terminator. No, this was curious, awkward, a little clumsy, and constantly asking for more information. The movie was Short Circuit, a sci-fi comedy directed by John Badham that somehow blended Cold War anxieties, slapstick comedy, and a surprisingly heartfelt story about what it means to be alive. The basic premise is wonderfully simple. At a military robotics facility, a group of experimental robots called Saint units are being developed as weapons. During a thunderstorm, one of them, number 5, is struck by lightning. Instead of just frying his circuits, the strike does something unexpected. It gives the robot a form of consciousness. Suddenly, number 5 isn't just a machine. He's not following programming. He's curious. He's scared. He's, most importantly, alive. Naturally, the military people who built him see things a little differently. They want their expensive robot back, so number 5 escapes into the real world, trying to learn everything he can about humans while avoiding the people hunting him down. Along the way, he befriends a kind, slightly eccentric animal lover named Stephanie Speck. And together, they try to prove that this metal machine is more than just a walking weapons platform. The robot himself, who later adopts the name Johnny 5, is voiced by Tim Blaney. Blaney had a long career as a voice actor and stage performer, but Johnny 5 easily became his most recognizable role. His voice performance is a big part of why the character works. There's this mix of childlike wonder and nervous energy in every line. The robot isn't just delivering dialogue, he's processing the world in real time. When he blurts out things like, "need input," or panics with "no disassemble," it feels oddly genuine for a pile of servos and metal panels. Playing the human lead is Steve Guttenberg as Dr. Newton Crosby, one of the scientists responsible for designing the robots. In the mid-1980s, Guttenberg was everywhere. He was coming off huge successes like Police Academy and would go on to star in films like Cocoon and 3 Men and a Baby. At the time, he had a reputation as one of the most reliable comedic leads in Hollywood. Kind of guy studios called when they wanted someone charming, slightly goofy, and instantly likable. Stephanie Speck is played by Sheedy. By 1986, she was already part of pop culture landscape, thanks to roles in War Games and, of course, the John Hughes classic, The Breakfast Club. She had this ability to play characters who felt sincere without being overly sweet, which makes her the perfect human counterpart to Johnny 5. Instead of reacting to the robot with fear, she treats him like a confused kid who just wandered into her life. Then there's Fisher Stevens as Ben, Newton's colleague, I guess. Stevens would later become well known for roles in movies like Hackers and as a character on the sitcom Friends. Eventually, he'd build a second career as a director and producer, even winning an Academy Award for producing the documentary The Cove. But his performance in Short Circuit has become one of the most debated parts of film over time. His character was written as Indian, and Stevens, a white actor, performed the role in heavy makeup and an accent. In the 1980s, it was played for comedy and largely went unquestioned. Today, it's often pointed to as an example of the era's casual approach to casting and cultural representation. Now, when Short Circuit came out in May of 1986, critics had mixed feelings about it. Some reviewers thought the movie was fun, but lightweight. Others felt it leaned too hard into cuteness. Roger Ebert famously gave it a pretty harsh review, saying that the movie was too cute for its own good. On the other hand, plenty of critics admitted that the robot itself was incredibly charming. Even reviewers who weren't sold on the story often agreed that Johnny 5 basically steals the movie. And audiences clearly agreed. Moviegoers gave the film strong ratings in surveys, and it ended up making about $40 million on a $15 million budget. For a mid-range sci-fi comedy in the 80s, that counted as a solid hit. But the really interesting part of Short Circuit is what happened after its release. Over the years, the movie built a much stronger reputation through home video, cable television, and endless reruns. In fact, by the late 1980s, it reportedly became one of the top home video rentals. For a lot of people who grew up in that era, Short Circuit wasn't just another movie, it was a childhood staple. The kind of film you'd catch halfway through on Saturday afternoon and end up watching all the way to the end anyway. When you revisit it now, one of the things that stands out is how surprisingly ahead of its time the central idea feels. The story asks a question that has become incredibly relevant today. If an artificial intelligence can think, learn, and express emotions, what responsibilities do humans have toward it? In the movie, Johnny Five is treated as property. The military wants him back because he's expensive hardware. But the story gradually pushes the idea that he's more than a machine. He learns language, reads books at hyperspeed, develops empathy, and even expresses fear of being destroyed. In 1986, that premise felt like light science fiction. Today, when we're constantly talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and whether computers might eventually achieve something resembling consciousness, the story hits a little differently. Johnny Five's obsession with absorbing information suddenly feels weirdly relatable. His constant requests for input are basically the robotic version of what modern AI systems are doing right now, scanning massive amounts of data to understand the world. Another reason the movie stuck around in pop culture is because it delivered some genuinely memorable moments. Johnny Five discovering television and rapidly learning about human culture is still hilarious. The robot zipping through books like Vacuum Cleaner for knowledge, it's oddly satisfying. Those moments help the character stick in people's memories long after the movie left theaters. The design of Johnny Five, created with practical effects and puppetry, also deserves a lot of credit. The filmmakers used a mix of full-scale mechanical rigs, puppeteering, and clever editing to make the robot feel expressive. His head tilts, camera lenses move like eyes, and his arms gesture almost like hands. Compared to modern CGI robots, there's something charmingly tangible about him. You can tell there's a real object on set interacting with the actors. Watching the film years later, there's also kind of a sincerity that feels very 1980s. The movie doesn't try to be ironic, it doesn't wink at the audience. It genuinely believes in its message, that empathy and curiosity are what makes someone, or something, alive. That earnestness can feel a little cheesy today, but also part of the charm. Of course, some elements haven't aged quite as gracefully. The previously mentioned casting choices around Fisher Stevens' character have been widely criticized in modern discussions of the film. And some of the jokes and cultural references clearly belong to a different era. But those issues exist alongside the movie's more timeless aspects. The friendship between Stephanie and Johnny, the robot's childlike fascination with humanity, and the simple idea that intelligence and kindness can exist in unexpected places. In the end, Short Circuit occupies a really interesting spot in 1980s movie history. It arrived during a period when Hollywood was experimenting with friendly science fiction characters. Think E.T., the Extraterrestrial, or Flight of the Navigator. But Johnny Five stood out because he wasn't an alien or a magical creature. He was a machine that became something more. And for a generation of viewers, that curious little robot rolling around asking for input, he became one of the most lovable sci-fi characters of the decade. Rewatching it now, the movie still feels like a time capsule. The clothes, the music, the pacing, it's all unmistakably 1980s. But underneath that nostalgia, there's still a surprisingly thoughtful story about technology, empathy, and the idea that being alive might have less to do with biology and more to do with curiosity about the world. And honestly, any movie that can make audiences cry over a robot begging not to be taken apart probably did something right. So whether you remember it from theater screenings, VHS rentals, or cable reruns, Short Circuit remains one of those movies that proves a simple concept can go a long way. Give audiences a character who wants to learn about the world, give them a few unforgettable lines, and suddenly a small sci-fi comedy about a runaway robot becomes something people are still talking about nearly 40 years later. Number 5, it turns out, really was alive. So how do you think Johnny Five would react if he suddenly had access to the modern internet? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more trips back to the video stores of old.